Today we are diving deep into something we all do dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day without a second thought: sending a work message. It seems so simple, right? But in that tiny split second after you hit send, there's this incredibly complex, hidden dance of technology that happens. We're going to follow that journey step by step.
I mean, really think about it. You type a quick note into Teams or Slack, hit enter, and bam, it just shows up on your colleague's screen. But what actually happens in that moment? Where does that little packet of data actually go? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and make that invisible journey totally visible.
You know, this is a perfect analogy for what we're talking about. Think about how banking has changed. It went from physically going to a branch and talking to a teller to now just tapping a button on an app. Our work communication has done the exact same thing. That clean, simple interface you're looking at, it's just the tip of a giant, complex iceberg of technology working behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's get our terms straight. The vehicles for our journey are these digital office communication systems. We're talking about the everyday tools we all use: Outlook, Microsoft Teams, Google Workspace, you name it. These are the platforms that get our messages from A to B.
And just like any highway system, you've got rules of the road. In our digital world, we call these regulations. And look, they're not just there to be annoying. They're the guardrails that keep our data secure, protect our privacy, and make sure all of this communication is happening legally and by the book. All right, let's start with leg one of our journey, the simplest, most straightforward path a message can possibly take. So imagine you're just sending a quick message to a colleague who's sitting just a few desks away from you in the same office.
As you can see right here, the path is super direct. Your message zips through the office's local area network. You can think of that as the building's own private road system. It passes through a quick security checkpoint, the internal firewall, gets handled by a company server, and boom, it arrives at your colleague's computer without ever having to touch the public internet.
Now, the beauty of this in-house system is that it's incredibly fast, it's very secure, and the company has total control over it. But, and this is a big but, it is not a fortress. The biggest dangers here actually come from the inside. We're talking about things like insider threats, or maybe some malware that's already managed to sneak onto the local network. Okay, let's level up the complexity a bit. What if your colleague isn't just a few desks away? What if they're in a completely different branch office in another city, but still inside the same country? Well, the journey starts to get a lot more interesting.
So now your message actually has to leave the building. It passes through the main company firewall and gets handed off to an internet service provider, or ISP. Think of them as your digital mail carrier. From there, it travels across the country, often making a quick pit stop in a cloud platform like Azure or AWS, before it finally gets to the other office.
The big advantage here is that the data stays within the country, which makes following the law a whole lot easier and usually keeps things moving fast. But now you're relying on outside help. If your ISP has an outage, your communication pretty much grinds to a halt, and you're now exposed to external threats, like a ransomware attack.
And now, let's tackle the final and most complex stage of our journey, the global route. This is what happens when you're working with a team on the other side of the world. This is where things get really, really intricate. Your message gets wrapped in multiple layers of security, often traveling inside an encrypted VPN tunnel, which is like its own armored car. It crosses oceans, gets processed by international cloud servers, and then it has to successfully navigate the digital borders and firewalls of a whole other country just to be delivered.
And here's where we hit the biggest challenges. It's not just about the physical distance causing delays anymore. Now you have to navigate this incredibly complex web of international laws. You've got things like data sovereignty rules, which say where data is allowed to be stored, and massive regulations like GDPR in Europe. It's a legal and technical minefield.
So there we have it. We've traced the 3 different journeys of a single work message: keeping it in-house, going national, and crossing international borders. Now, let's pull back and look at the whole picture all at once.
This right here, this is the key takeaway of the whole thing. As you look from left to right on this chart, you can just see the complexity explode. Everything, from the path it takes, to the security needed, to the legal hoops you have to jump through, it all gets dramatically more complicated. We go from a nice, simple, controlled environment to this massive, tangled web of global rules.
So you might be asking, why? Why go through all this trouble? Well, this slide really gets to the heart of it. Every single firewall, every encrypted tunnel, every single regulation is there for one of these 4 reasons: to keep our chat secure, to make sure everything is legally compliant,
to keep track of who said what and to protect our privacy. It's all about building trust in a digital world.
And that really leads us to a pretty fascinating question about where we're headed. You know, with AI assistants starting to communicate on our behalf and remote work making borders feel kind of irrelevant, what's the next layer of this journey going to look like? What new digital highways and what new rules of the road are we going to need to build? That's a future that we are all shaping right now. Thanks for joining me on this journey.